Hey, thank you for watching today, Reclaim Media. I'm so glad that you're joining me today. It's actually our very first midweek or in the middle of the week, middle of the day live stream, so I'm hoping that you enjoy it. We're trying to switch it up a little bit here. And so, man, thank you again for joining. Thank you for liking the video. Make sure you like it, make sure you share it, and leave some comments below so that we can kind of connect a little bit. Today, I want to talk to you about how to leave the church or your church in the right way. I think over the last couple of years, especially since the pandemic came through and everything really started to begin to change, I've seen more people switch churches than I really have in my entire life. There's people that I grew up with in a certain church that we all kind of thought we'd be a part of this church together, you know, for the long run, see our kids grow up together. And I've seen people switch churches, leave churches, and even the worst part is I've seen people leave church altogether, which obviously we don't celebrate that. That's not a good thing. We want people to be a part of a church as long as it's a healthy church. But I do believe that there are times when you do need to move on from the church that you're currently at. Now, I'm kind of on the side most of the time of try to stay, try to work it out, try to make things right, try to build together. I think that's the best thing we can do. But I also understand that there are some times where you do just have to leave. But if we do have to leave, whether it's a healthy environment or an unhealthy environment, I still think that we can go about it the right way as individuals. Even if our leadership doesn't quite go at it in the way we think they should, or our pastors don't respond the way that we think they should, I still think that we as the individual, as the person actually transitioning or moving on, we could be the ones to handle it correctly. So today I want to give you some tips on how to leave the church and to make sure that you're not burning any bridges or hurting any people as you go. And so the first thing that I want to advise you to do if you are planning on leaving the church is get godly advice. Now, if you're in a healthy church, it is good to sit down with your leaders, with your pastor, and just kind of talk to them about what you're thinking, what you've been praying through, what you've been thinking about when it comes to that transition. Healthy leaders will give you good advice through this process. Healthy leaders will help you to make sure you're making the best decision for you and your relationship with the Lord. Even if it affects their church, even if it gives them some missing pieces, they still want to help you. So it is good to have healthy leaders and making sure that you're getting some godly advice. In Proverbs 11:14, it says, "Where there is no guidance, a people falls, but in abundance of counselors, there is safety." Now, I've had people come to me with asking for advice about big transitions or moves or anything like that. And I always find it interesting that when people come for advice, there's two ways they approach the conversation. Is one, they come in and they've already decided in their mind, hey, Pastor Mike, I'm telling you, this is exactly what I'm doing. I'm leaving the church. I'm moving out of state. I'm getting this new career, this new job, or whatever it is. And as a leader, as a pastor, it's never my job to control anybody. So if somebody comes and says, I've already made a decision, the response, at least my response, is kind of like, well, okay, God bless you, go on your way, and pray for them and help them in that decision they've already made. To be honest, I don't think that this is the best approach to getting godly advice, because what you're doing is you're going up to somebody, your leader or your pastor, and you're basically saying, hey, I've already decided to do this. How much room is there for advice in that kind of statement? How much change can actually be brought to your mind and to your heart when you approach the conversation saying, I've already decided to do this. There's really nothing that you can do about it. I've made up my mind. Especially when people say things like, hey, God told me I need to do this. Now, I know that God speaks. I know that he speaks to our hearts. He speaks in our spirit, and we hear the voice of God. But I do think that term is used way too much, that people almost lean on that term, because as a pastor, how are you supposed to argue that? Or how are you supposed to advise that? Hey, God told me this. This is what God is speaking. Well, okay, then I'm not going to be the one to argue against God. Do what he says, right? But most of the time, I think God's not really speaking that. Sometimes it's coming from our emotions or the things that we're struggling with at the time. And so when you are approaching a leader, approach, instead of saying, I've already made a decision, approach saying, hey, I'm thinking about making this decision. What do you think I should do? I think that kind of approach is a humble approach, and it's an approach that will open the door to the best advice, because now you can have somebody speak into your life and say, hey, you know, these are the things that you're thinking about. I'm going to give you a new perspective. I'm going to give you maybe something that you didn't think about. I remember I would have conversations with my pastors or my pastor all the time, and that I tried my best to bring up questions to him or decisions that I needed to make in the manner of, hey, what do you think? And I would say about 80% of the time, my pastor would always approach from an angle that I didn't even think about. And when he would approach from that angle that it wasn't even in my mind, it would open up a whole new avenue of different decisions that I needed to make, different aspects that I wasn't considering in the decision I was going to make. And so asking for advice, you approach it with humility, understanding, man, I'm not as wise as the leaders above me. I need help. I need guidance. So I'm going to you and I'm asking you, what do you think? And as you're going to these mentors or these leaders or these pastors, I think it's also important that when you go to somebody, that you're going to an unbiased individual. I've tried my best, and even again, I'm going to kind of relate to my pastor as much as I can because I know he's dealt with this a lot. But I've always tried my best when somebody brings a decision that needs to be made and they ask for advice. I try my best to be unbiased. My hope is not just to build a strong church or a strong ministry, but my hope as a leader is to build strong people. And in order to build strong people, we have to be unbiased in the advice that we give. And so when you're asking somebody for advice, make sure you're going to an unbiased mentor, leader, or friend that's going to actually give you godly advice. I see people chatting up over here. What's up, guys? Thank you for joining the live stream today. And if you have any questions as we're going through, make sure you leave them here below, and I'll try to get to them at the end of the teaching. So last thing when it comes to getting godly advice, make sure you're spending time in prayer. I think too often we make decisions like this, leaving churches, leaving ministries, quitting ministry, all this different stuff. We make these decisions way too fast, and I think we don't really spend enough time praying about it. If God is leading you to a new place, he will speak to you, and he'll speak to you through prayers, through leaders, and through the word. So make sure you're not making a move without the guidance of the Holy Spirit. So number one, get godly advice as you're leaving this church. Number two, and I think this is a very, very important part of making this decision, is make sure you have solid grounds to actually leave. Right? Is there a real issue at the church? Is there a real reason that I'm leaving? Or am I just being emotional or compulsive? I remember when me and my wife had first got married, I think it was around that time. We were young married, maybe about a year or two. And I was really frustrated with things that were happening in my current church. I didn't really like the way that our ministry was growing. We were being involved in different ministries, and I was getting really frustrated. And I remember I kind of presented this idea to my wife, like, hey, babe, what do you think about transitioning to a different church? Now, this wasn't a good idea, obviously, but we talked about it, and I had to really think about, well, why am I leaving? Am I leaving because it's unhealthy? Am I leaving because I truly don't receive from this pastor, or he's not a good leader? He doesn't really care about me. Is that why I'm leaving? And the answer to that question was no. I wanted to leave because I was frustrated, because I was being emotional, because I was being just really like, I just wanted to make it happen. I didn't want to do that anymore. I didn't want to deal with these certain things. And so we have to make sure that when we're deciding or thinking about leaving a ministry or church, that we actually have solid grounds to leave and to transition out. Is God really leading me out of this, or is it my flesh? Is the Spirit of the Lord really speaking to me about these issues that I see, or am I just looking at all the issues through the eyes of my frustration, through the eyes of my confusion, through the eyes of my bitterness, through the eyes of my grudges? Because if you're looking at your church through those eyes, you're going to see everything wrong with it, and you're going to see all the reasons that you need to leave. But if we look at it through the eyes of the Spirit, we don't see problems that can't be solved, but we see problems where we can come in and be the solution. We don't just complain about issues. We begin to step in and say, well, let me help this issue. Let me fix this issue. So sometimes when we're contemplating to leave a ministry, it's not really based on any solid foundation. It's really based on the fact that we're frustrated, we're being emotional. Sometimes we're getting upset because people are actually trying to disciple us. People are they're actually trying to guide us. And it's like, well, who are you to tell me? I'm going to go to a different church. You can't speak to me like that. You have no authority. And it's this real prideful way of looking at church and ministry. There's biblical authority, and we see that all throughout Scripture. And so sometimes we get frustrated because people are actually practicing that biblical authority, and it doesn't work for us because we're prideful, and so we want to leave. But when you want to leave, you have to make sure that is actually on solid grounds, that there's actually biblical reasons why you need to go. And remember, at the end of this teaching, I'm going to go into my 5 top reasons why you should leave a church. And I think those reasons will help this point kind of be cleared up for you. So number 3, again, thank you guys for joining online. If you have questions, leave them below. If this is blessing you, make sure you like the video, comment, and share this with somebody else. Maybe you know somebody that's dealing with this situation right now. Why don't you share this video with them so they can join in and see what this teaching is all about? Okay, so number 3, how to leave a church in the right way is you have to honor leadership. You have to honor the pastors. And I would even say you have to honor their timeline. There may be a moment where you've prayed about it, you've talked to leadership, you've gotten godly advice, and now you're sitting with your pastor, you're saying, hey, I'm transitioning out, I'm ready to go, God's leading me in a different direction, or whatever it is. Then I think it's best, sometimes a good pastor might give you a timeline. Hey, can you stay a couple more weeks? Can you stay maybe another month? And I think we have to honor this timeline to an extent, because there are some pastors who will try to manipulate and get us to stay for a super long time just to kind of convince us to stay there forever. And so if it's God leading you out, you got to go. Honor the transition, honor the timeline to an extent, but make sure you're listening to the voice and the Spirit of God. And so you have to honor the leadership that's within the church. In 1 Timothy 5:17, it says, let the elders who rule well be considered worthy of double honor, especially those who labor in preaching and teaching. 1 Thessalonians 5:12-13 says, we ask you, brothers, to respect those who labor among you and are over you in the Lord and admonish you, and to esteem them very highly in love because of their work. Be at peace among yourselves. So honoring leadership is important as you're making this transition, but also communicating to your leaders, letting them know what you're doing. I think the worst thing that anybody can do is just leave a church without saying anything. I feel like that is, I almost think it's a little bit dishonoring, but I feel like also too, it's confusing for the people at the church. Like almost like, man, what happened? Are they coming? Are they going? Are they still here? Are they not here anymore? And so I think there has to be some communication. And remember, good leaders don't try to control you, they guide you. And so if you're afraid, man, I don't want to bring this to the table because they're going to try to make me stay, they're going to try to manipulate me, then that's a whole different conversation. And again, we're going to get to that at the end. But if you have a good leader, they're gonna guide you through it. They're not gonna try to control you, make you stay. And so you have to communicate these things. Talk to them. Make sure they know what's going on. Make sure they know the timeline that's happening, because you may not see all the moving pieces that take place in a church, but when somebody just leaves without saying anything, that actually affects what the church is doing. So if you're making that transition, you have to make sure you're communicating, hey, I'm leaving and this is going to be my last day. Whenever that is, there has to be communication. And again, when it comes to honoring leadership, thank your leaders. Man, there's people that invested in you. Maybe it wasn't you personally, but they invested in the church that blessed you, that helped you grow. And so I think it matters as we're making those transitions, making those decisions, that we actually thank them and show gratitude for the investment they gave us, they poured into us, they helped us through different seasons in our lives. So as you're transitioning, make sure you thank and honor your leaders. And lastly, when it comes to leadership, and I don't think this applies to everybody, but I do think it applies to most people, is as you're transitioning out, make sure you forgive your leaders. Some of us are making the transition because we've been hurt by leadership. We've been hurt by pastors. We've been manipulated. We've been controlled. We've been maybe dishonored. And we're in that season where, like, man, I know that I need to go, and it's my time to go. And sometimes we can leave and we don't forgive. And if we leave and we don't forgive, that's almost like putting yourself in this box, and you're not going to be able to grow out of that, because forgiveness is the key to your growth. If you're planning on leaving a church and you're saying, man, I need to grow in another church, and you don't forgive the past church or the current church, then you're gonna hinder your own spiritual growth because you refuse to forgive. And so as you're making that transition, make sure that forgiveness is something that is in your heart, that you're not holding bitterness against your old leaders. You're not upset with them anymore. You're not bothered with them, but you are forgiving them. You're letting these things go so that you can grow in the next season as you are transitioning. Number 4, and thank you again for leaving the question. It's really helpful to the stream, really helpful to our videos. Don't forget, like and share it. Number 4, and I think this one is super important, especially as a pastor and leading a church, is help train someone to take your place. Don't leave a void in your church if possible. Don't just get up and leave and then there's a spot open where they need where they need somebody who can do what you do to help them. 1 Corinthians 12:12 says, "For just as the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ." And so think about this. If the church is a body, every member fills a part of the body. Every member fills a role. So if you're leaving and you're transitioning out, that means whatever role you were filling is now open and somebody else needs to fill that. And so I feel like this is another level of honor. When you leave, you're saying, okay, I'm not just going to get up and go, but I'm going to stay for a while. I'm going to train somebody to do what I do, whether it's disciple, whether it's even practical things like sound, lighting, music, worship ministry, kids church, whatever those things are. And you're leaving the ministry saying, I'm going to train somebody. I'm going to train somebody to take my spot so the church is not left void or empty or with no help. I'm going to help them make sure that I'm not leaving this spot that they're going to need to fill on their own. Now, sometimes we don't want to fill that spot. And the reason we don't want to fill that spot is because, and this is, again, if you're bitter and you're upset, is we can think, man, I want them to feel the pain of me leaving. I want them to feel the pain of my absence because they didn't appreciate all the things I did. They never thanked me for all the time that I spent. So I want them to know what they're missing out on when I leave. Can I just say that that's just ungodly? That's not right. That's not right to have that attitude. That says a lot about your spirit that you carried within that house. And it almost says more about you than it does about them. If we're unwilling to help and to make sure that we're not just leaving people empty-handed, especially when they're preaching the gospel and building the kingdom of God, then it says a lot about us. One of the best things that you can do, whether it's a healthy environment or an unhealthy environment, is to bless on your way out. To make a healthy environment is to make sure that the place you're leaving is more blessed because you were there, is more favored by God because you were there, and you're not just leaving them empty-handed. I think even too, ask your pastors, hey, what's the best way that I can leave to where you're not just left with all these needs in the church? What do you want me to focus on in my training? How do you want me to train the next person to take my spot? Some pastors won't accept this. Some pastors won't really even want this. And you kind of just, I guess deal with that as the time comes. But I still even think making that available is really important, that you ask the pastor, hey, how can I help before I leave? So let's go on to the next one. I hope this is blessing you. I really do. If you're in that season of transition, or even if you're a leader and you're dealing with people in this transition, this is how you can kind of help them to make sure they do it the right way. Okay, number 5, evaluate yourself. As you're leaving, as anytime we're transitioning, it's so easy to point at everything else around and say, well, the church did this, the church did that, they messed up here, they messed up there. But how often do we look into ourselves and evaluate what we're doing and how we're handling situation? In Revelation 3:17, it says, "For you say, I am rich, I have prospered, and I need nothing, not realizing that you are wretched, pitiable, poor, blind, and naked." Sometimes we think we're in the right and everything is good with us, and when in reality we don't see the issues and the baggage that we've been carrying and that we've been actually spilling all over into the church that we've been a part of. Matthew 7:3-5 says, "Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye when there is a log in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye." Again, we look at the church and we see all the specks, all the issues, and we look at that and say, man, they need to fix this, they need to fix that, they need to take care of this. But what about the log that is in our eye? What about the issues that we're dealing with? What about the attitudes that we carry? This is all something that we need to evaluate within ourselves. Think, man, could I have done something to improve that situation? Am I just carrying the same baggage that I had in the previous church to my new church? Am I carrying the same attitude that I had in my last ministry to my new ministry? Evaluate yourself in the season of transition. I'm going to drink some water real quick, and then we'll get into the last point, and then I'm going to do my top 5 reasons why you should leave a church. Because again, like I said in the beginning, I'm mostly on the side of staying and making it work, but there are some times when you have to leave. Okay, number 6, here we go. This one is the last one, and I think it's something that you can control personally. We can't control everything that happens in the church or as we're leaving, the attitudes, the things that they do. But here's something that you can control as you're making this transition. Don't sow seeds of discord. Don't leave a trail of gossip and slander and bitterness and grudges. Do not cause division into the ministry that you're leaving. Romans 16:17 says, I appeal to you, brothers, to watch out for those who cause divisions and create obstacles contrary to the doctrine that you've been taught. Avoid them. I think that we have to be careful not to be the issue that the scriptures warn the church of, that we don't become the problem of the church that we're leaving. Leave with grace, because not everyone needs to know your complaints or your reasons. Leave with love, leave with forgiveness, leave with the good attitude. Don't talk about the church and the leadership behind their backs. There's no need for that. There's no purpose for that. I understand that, we always feel like we have to validate ourselves and affirm why we make these decisions, but sometimes it's best to just leave quietly, let the leadership know, the pastors know, and let them deal with the issues. And sometimes it's best to leave. And I think a part of this too is don't try to bring everybody with you. And I get it. If there are unhealthy churches and really, really bad environments and really bad places, yes, get them, set them free, help them escape. But if there's an environment where it's just not your preference or you just don't like it, it's not your job to bring everybody out and follow you. That's not what we should do. We leave on our own. God's calling us. God's leading us out. That doesn't mean he's leading everybody else out. And so don't try to cause division. Don't try to take people with you. Don't spread rumors. Just go on your way. Let God work in them. Let God work in you. Don't sow seeds of discord, but be loving towards them. I mean, how does the Bible say to treat our enemies? Even if the church was rude to you, even if they did hurt you, even if they did all these things against you, I mean, man, how does the Bible say to treat these kinds of people? It says to bless them, to pray for them, to love them. And so that's our job as we're leaving churches, as we're transitioning out, that we don't sow seeds of discord. Romans 12:18 says, if possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Again, this depends on us. And I see we have some audio issues. I'm sure that we're working on them. So I'm hoping that the audio lines up again before we end. So live peaceably with your church. When you're leaving, do whatever you can to make sure you're staying at peace with everybody that was in the past church, your pastors and your leaders. All right, now I'm going to get into my top 5 reasons you need to leave a church. Before I do that, I want to recap on the best way and the most honoring way that you can leave the church you're in. Number 1, get godly advice. Number 2, make sure you have solid grounds to leave. Number 3, honor the pastors and leaders. Number 4, help train someone to take your place and to fill your role. Number 5, evaluate yourself. And number 6, don't sow seeds of discord. All right. If this blessed you, make sure you like the video, subscribe to Reclaim Media as you're watching it, share it with somebody. We'll be doing these live streams actually every week. We're still working on the times, but I think we're going to do Wednesdays at 2 p.m. So make sure you're joining right here on the live stream, and so you can be a part of the Reclaim Media community. Okay, my top 5 reasons you need to leave a church. And again, I want to say this because I want to be crystal clear about my stance. I think 80 to 90% of the time we should stay and we should help build, because sometimes our complaints and our frustrations is not a sign that we should leave, but it's almost a sign that we should lean in and step up to help in those areas. But I'm not ignorant to understand that there are actually very, very, very unhealthy and ungodly churches, and even some churches that aren't just good for us specifically. And so my top 5 reasons, then I got a question here. I'll get to it. And if you have any more questions about this or about any other church stuff, you can leave it below. So number 1, I think if there's disagreements on doctrines, it just doesn't make sense for you to stay in the church. For example, like if you don't believe in healing and the church you're a part of does healing, if you don't believe in women pastors or women ministers and the church you're going to has women pastors or women ministers, speaking in tongues, the way deliverance is done, all these different things. If you're going to a church and you really feel like, man, I just don't agree with like all this stuff that they're doing, then it doesn't really make sense that you stay around. I had a great leader in our church. He just transitioned out, and I love him and his family. We really have no issues between us and each other and the church. And he sat down with me and he's like, hey, I really feel like it's time for us to move on. And as we started talking about it, he had mentioned that he just disagrees on some of the doctrinal things that we do at the church, or some of the, the way we speak in tongues, or different things like that. And he made a point. He said, I don't think it would be helpful to the church in the long run if I remain here and disagree on so many levels, because I feel like it would bring division. The way he approached that to me was probably the best way that anybody could approach it, because he wasn't blaming anybody. He wasn't like fighting about or being upset about it. He was just saying, listen, we just disagree on some things that are really important to me. And so I feel it's best for me and for the church that I move on. So number one, what are my top 5 reasons to leave a church is disagreements on doctrines. I think that's really important. Number 2 is no leadership accountability. Leaders can just do whatever they want. They can sin. They could have bad attitudes, and there's no accountability towards the leadership. I think that's super unhealthy. I think it's unbiblical, and I think that it's a toxic environment when leaders are not spirit-led, but they're led by the flesh and they're led by their emotions, and you can see it in their attitudes and even in the way they approach people. I think that's a great sign that it's like, man, maybe this place isn't for me. Now, some people can deal with it. Some people can work through that. But if there's no leadership accountability and it's a very unhealthy leadership style, I think that's not a good place for us to be a part of. Like if the leaders are controlling, hey, you're not allowed to go on vacation with your family. What do you mean I'm not allowed to do that? That's controlling. Hey, you're not allowed to do this. You have to do this and this and this. I think there's a place for discipleship, but there's a place for accountability and even authority. But when there's manipulation and unhealthy control of leadership because there's no accountability over them, I think that's super unhealthy. I think that's a time where you need to consider, man, maybe I need to move on, find a healthier environment. Number 3 for my top 5 reasons is when there's sin in the church, and it's not just happening in the church, but it's allowed and affirmed. I feel like this is a no-brainer because if they're flaunting sin, like that's a really bad environment. It's unbiblical. The Spirit of God is probably not in the room, and it's not a place where any Christian can really grow. And so if you want to grow, don't be at a place where they're allowing something that literally kills the Spirit to be celebrated, affirmed, and accepted. Now, I believe in accepting sinners into the church. What good would the church be if we're not saving sinners? But when we accept sinners into the church, I mean, we're all sinners, right? When we all came to the church, we are sinners. We're saved by grace. Thank God for what he gave us. But there's a difference between accepting the sinner and affirming the sin. If there's acceptance of a sinner, that's great. If there's affirmation of sin, that's ungodly. So if there's a church that's affirming sin, that they're okay with, people living together that aren't married, they're okay with, same-sex marriage and all these different things they're obviously unbiblical, then that's something we have to make sure, man, I can't be a part of that environment. I'm going to go to a church where they make a stand against sin. They accept the sinner, but don't affirm the sin. So when there's sin that's allowed in the church, that's a major red flag. That's something that we should avoid. Number 4 is an unhealthy culture. Like we talked about with leadership, no, it's all controlling, no rest, no encouragement, no celebration. It's just unhealthy. It's not, and you'll know when you walk into a place, you could, especially if you're being led by the Lord and Spirit-filled, you can feel the environment when it's a toxic church environment. Now, no church is perfect. We just talked about how we accept sinners into the church. We're all sinners. We're all broken people. None of us are perfect. So there's no such thing as a perfect church. But just because it's not perfect doesn't mean it can't be healthy. And so you have to find a healthy church with a healthy environment, and anything that's an unhealthy culture, whether it's sometimes an unhealthy culture can be, you can see it as they treat the pastor as almost as God, and his word is the final word, and nobody can question his word. Nobody can question where they're going. I think that's a sign of an unhealthy culture. A lot of gossip, a lot of slander. That's another sign of unhealthy culture. So there's all these things. In fact, I actually have a video about that, about red flags of churches. And you should definitely watch it. Go to the YouTube channel and look for it. Red flags of churches. I think that's kind of lays out what are unhealthy church traits. Last one, and I do think this one is kind of rare. I do believe it happens, but not all the time, because I think all the other transitions happen more often. But the last one, for the reasons you should leave a church or a ministry, is when God is clearly calling you to a different place. This does happen, and where God speaks to us, like, you know what, you helped here, you built something, you blessed them, and now we're going to transition you out. And here's what's beautiful about this kind of transition. If you're in a healthy environment, you have godly and healthy leaders, these people will actually affirm in you what God is speaking. You can go to them and say, hey, I feel the Lord is leading me to a different place. And what they'll do is they say, you know what, let me pray about it with you. Let me help you through this. And if it's God, you'll come together and both of you will say, man, this is the Lord. Let's help you in this transition. Let's lead you out of this church in a healthy way. And we've had it here in our church where people have transitioned out, and we've prayed over them. You know, we had one of the younger women in our church. She felt God calling her to a different state to go and be a part of a ministry out in, I think it was in California. And, you know, we didn't say, no, you need to stay because God will only use you at this church. No, we prayed her through it. We blessed her out. We gave her some finances to fund her travel back to California, and we blessed her out because we felt, man, God is speaking to her. We want to make sure that we're a part of God's will and not going against God's will. So when God is clearly speaking to you and transitioning you out, you're going to see signs of confirmation. I believe you're going to have healthy leaders and healthy friends that are going to guide you in that. And so those are my top 5 reasons why you should leave a church. If you're struggling with any of those, make sure you talk to somebody. You can message us. I'd love to pray with you and kind of talk you through it. But man, I love doing this live stream. I got one question here, and so I'm going to see if I can get to it. It says, how does one get involved in a church, having never been involved in one before? Any advice and tips? Man, absolutely. I love this question because we're actually building a church here in Texas, and we love when people want to get involved. And so I think the best way to get involved is to just start serving in any capacity that's available. I think there's always these certain ministries, at least for us, that are really easy to join, like, you know, a greeters ministry, ushering ministry, anything that's just kind of serving and helping people. Those are always great, like, ways to step into involvement. But I think before you get involved into a church, you have to understand their culture. You got to understand their values, because if you're not careful, you can jump quickly into a church and then you see down the line, man, I don't even want to be here anymore. I shouldn't have committed so fast. And so I think as you're attending a church, make sure that it's the right church for you. Pray about it, and then talk to good leaders. Make sure I think one of the best things that you can do is go to as many things that the church is offering as possible. So if it's Sunday mornings, go Sunday morning. If they have a midweek, go midweek as much as you can. If they have a Bible study, go to the Bible study as much as you can, because that is involvement. When you're getting connected to the community, that's the best way to get involved in serving. So I think that you can serve, you can get involved in a church by serving, attending, and making sure that you're integrating into the community. And so, there's another question. Here you go. Is it an obligation to continue financially supporting a church that you left, especially a church you really loved? My opinion is no. If you're leaving the church and you're going to join a new church, my personal belief is that whatever finances you were giving to that old church, now you're a part of a new body and you're going to start putting your finances into that church. Now, if God is speaking to you and kind of leading you in the direction, saying, hey, I still want you to support, I do think that a portion should go to your new church. And if you want to bless the old church, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we bless other ministries all the time, even as a church. And so I don't see any problem with blessing other ministries, but I do think like your specific tithe and offering that you give monthly should be given to your home church where you're connecting with and you're growing. So that was a couple of questions, man. That was great. I really had fun doing this. We're going to do this every week as much as possible. So make sure you join the next one. Let me know what you thought of the live stream. Maybe you're catching it late. If you're catching it late, leave some questions anyway in the comments and I'll get back to it as they come in. Thank you again for watching. Don't forget, like this video, share the stream, share the video, subscribe to Reclaim Media. Make sure you turn on the notifications so that you can be notified as we go live 2 times every week, one midweek, one Sunday morning, 11 a.m. Central Time. So thank you again for watching. I will see you next week.